Story 1. In the heart of the city, the towering skyscraper known as Greystone Industries stood as a monolithic testament to corporate ambition. Its fluorescent lights illuminated the urban landscape well into the night, and its employees often found themselves working late into the evening. One such employee was Sarah, a diligent and ambitious young woman who had recently taken on the role of night shift supervisor. She prided herself on her commitment to the job, but little did she know that her dedication would lead her to a terrifying and inexplicable ordeal. Sarah's shift started like any other. The office was nearly empty, with only a handful of employees scattered throughout the labyrinthine building. As the hours passed, the quiet hum of the office machinery and the occasional ringing of a phone were her only companions. The city outside was shrouded in darkness, and a thick fog had rolled in, obscuring the view from the windows. Sarah felt a sense of isolation that was both eerie and captivating. As the clock neared midnight, Sarah received a call from the building's security team. The night guard, a stoic man named Frank, had fallen ill and couldn't make it to work. Sarah was informed that she would have to temporarily take over his responsibilities until a replacement could be found. She reluctantly agreed and was given a set of keys, a walkie-talkie, and access to the security office on the lower level. Descending into the dimly lit basement, Sarah was greeted by the oppressive silence that seemed to have seeped into the very walls of the building. The security office was a small, windowless room filled with banks of monitors displaying the numerous security camera feeds from around the building. She took a seat in the worn-out chair and tried to get accustomed to her new role. The minutes turned into hours, and Sarah watched the surveillance screens with a growing sense of unease. The empty corridors, the flickering lights, and the occasional distant rumble of thunder outside all contributed to an atmosphere that seemed to be straight out of a horror movie. Sarah was grateful for the company of her walkie-talkie, which allowed her to communicate with the maintenance staff on the upper floors and occasionally chat with her colleagues on the night shift. But as the night wore on, the odd occurrences began. One of the security cameras on the 17th floor started showing a bizarre static distortion. Sarah watched in disbelief as the static transformed into a shadowy figure that seemed to be moving through the hallway. She quickly radioed maintenance, thinking it was a technical glitch, but they reported nothing unusual. The next unsettling event occurred on the 14th floor. Sarah saw a door slowly creak open, revealing a long, empty corridor. The camera feed showed no one entering or exiting, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She decided to investigate, radioing one of the maintenance staff to accompany her. Together, they ascended the elevator to the 14th floor. The corridor was eerily quiet, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows. As they approached the open door, Sarah hesitated for a moment before cautiously pushing it further ajar. The room beyond was empty, and there was no explanation for why it had opened on its own. Uneasy but determined to get back to her security post, Sarah and the maintenance worker returned to the basement. However, the strange occurrences continued. Security cameras displayed odd anomalies, like flickering lights, doors opening and closing, and, most unsettlingly, glimpses of shadowy figures moving in the periphery. As Sarah reached out to her colleagues on the walkie-talkie, she noticed an odd pattern. None of them seemed to be experiencing these anomalies, and they couldn't see anything unusual on their own camera feeds. It was as though she was the sole witness to these disturbing events. The situation escalated when Sarah heard a faint whisper on the walkie-talkie. At first, it was unintelligible, but as she strained to listen, the words became clearer. It was a voice, soft and haunting, repeating a single phrase, "You're not alone." Fear surged through her, and she frantically called out to her colleagues, but the voice persisted, growing louder and more insistent. In a panic, Sarah grabbed the walkie-talkie and ran out of the security office. She had to escape the relentless whispers. In her rush to leave the basement, Sarah forgot the keys to the security office. She raced up the stairs, hearing the voice growing closer, echoing in the stairwell. It was as though it was pursuing her, following her every step. The higher she climbed, the more distorted and unnatural the building's interior became, with walls appearing to pulsate and shadows stretching unnaturally. Finally, Sarah reached the ground floor, but the exit was locked, and the building had transformed into an otherworldly nightmare. The once familiar office had become a labyrinth of endless corridors, doors that led to nowhere, and bizarre, surreal landscapes. It was as though she had stepped into a realm where the laws of reality no longer applied. Desperation and terror consumed her, and the voice on the walkie-talkie continued to torment her. She couldn't escape it, no matter how fast she ran or which direction she turned. The voice seemed to come from all around her, as though it emanated from the very walls of the building. Hours passed, or perhaps it was an eternity. Sarah had lost all sense of time. Her only solace was her fading hope that dawn would eventually break, dispelling the nightmarish vision that surrounded her. She continued to wander the twisted corridors, searching for an exit that never appeared. Just when she thought she had reached the limits of her endurance, the fog outside the building began to recede, and the first rays of daylight pierced through the windows. The building slowly returned to its normal state, and the bizarre occurrences ceased. Sarah, drained and disoriented, found herself back on the ground floor, the exit door now accessible. She stumbled out into the pale morning light, leaving the nightmare of Greystone Industries behind her. As she looked back at the towering skyscraper, it appeared like any other corporate office, with its sterile facade and bustling daytime activity. But she knew that beneath the surface it held a dark secret, one that would forever haunt her. Sarah never returned to Greystone Industries. She quit her job, moved far away from the city, and tried to forget the horrors she had experienced. To this day, she can't explain the inexplicable events that occurred during that fateful night shift, and the whispers of "you're not alone" continue to echo in her nightmares, a chilling reminder of the night she was truly alone at work. Story 2. In the small town of Hollowbrook, nestled among the woods and hills, stood an old, decaying library. The building, known as Hollowbrook Public Library, had been abandoned for years due to financial constraints, and the townsfolk had long since forgotten its existence. Except for one person, Emily, the town's archivist. Emily had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past, and she was the only one left who remembered the library's vast collection of historical documents, records, and manuscripts. She had a small office in the town's municipal building, where she worked as the town archivist. Her responsibility was to preserve and catalog the history of Hollowbrook, which included managing the collection from the now forgotten library. One fateful night, Emily decided to revisit the abandoned library. She felt an irresistible urge to dig deeper into the town's history, and she believed there were still valuable records left unexamined in the old building. Armed with a flashlight and the dusty key she'd held onto for years, Emily ventured into the darkened library. The library was a haunting place, filled with echoes of the past. Cobwebs draped across the shelves, and forgotten books lay strewn about. The air was heavy with the scent of aging paper, and the silence was almost oppressive. As Emily made her way through the dusty aisles, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of foreboding, as if she were being watched. She reached the back of the library, where a hidden doorway led to a basement filled with rows of file cabinets. This was where the most valuable historical documents were stored, and Emily's excitement grew as she realized that these files might hold secrets that could shed new light on Hollowbrook's history. Emily spent hours meticulously examining the dusty, brittle pages, uncovering forgotten stories of the town's founding, its early settlers, and the various tragedies that had befallen the community over the years. However, as the night deepened, an eerie sensation crept over her, The creaking of the old floorboards, the flickering of her flashlight, and the sound of the wind outside began to play tricks on her mind. She thought she heard whispers, distant and faint, as if the walls of the library itself held the voices of the past. At first, Emily brushed it off as her imagination, but the whispers grew more persistent. As she continued her work, the voices seemed to coalesce into actual words, though she couldn't discern their meaning. Frightened, but determined to uncover the hidden history, Emily pressed on. The voices became more insistent, and she noticed that they were coming from a locked cabinet in the corner of the basement. With trembling hands, she picked the lock and opened the cabinet, revealing a trove of ancient handwritten diaries. One diary in particular caught her attention. It belonged to a woman named Eliza Holloway, a name that had a deep resonance with the town's history. As Emily began to read, she was drawn into the story of Eliza, who had lived in Hollowbrook in the late 19th century. Eliza's diary chronicled her life, her love, and her descent into madness as she grappled with the secrets hidden in the town. The more Emily read, the more absorbed she became in Eliza's tragic tale. She could almost hear Eliza's voice echoing through time, sharing her fear, her despair, and her belief that something malevolent lurked beneath Hollowbrook. Eliza's words seemed to resonate with the whispers that had filled the library. Suddenly, Emily heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the floor above. Panic welled up within her as she realized that she was not alone in the library. She strained her ears to listen, but the footsteps ceased. She was trapped in the basement, cut off from the exit, and paralyzed by fear. With her flashlight extinguished, Emily crouched in the dark, clutching the diary, the only source of light and comfort. In the inky blackness, she heard the whispers growing louder and more distinct. The voices were now calling her name, urging her to join them, to unlock the secrets of Hollowbrook. Terrified and desperate, Emily considered her options. Should she make a run for it, attempt to find the intruder, or wait in the basement for help? The decision was taken out of her hands when the footsteps resumed, coming down the creaking stairs into the basement. As the intruder descended into the darkness, Emily remained hidden, clutching Eliza's diary to her chest. She watched as a figure emerged from the shadows, a hunched and disheveled man, wild-eyed and muttering to himself. He didn't seem to notice her presence, his attention fixed on something else. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that this man was no ordinary intruder. He seemed to be in a trance, drawn to the same mysterious voices that had haunted her. With trembling hands, Emily decided to take a risk and approach the man. "Sir, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice quavering. The man's head snapped in her direction, his eyes locking onto hers. He looked at her with a mixture of fear and recognition. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice quivering. The man's eyes darted around the basement, and he seemed to be wrestling with inner demons. "I came to find the truth," he finally said. "The truth about Hollowbrook." Before Emily could ask more questions, the man's demeanor changed, and he became agitated. He began muttering incomprehensibly, as if he were arguing with the voices in his head. It was then that Emily noticed his hand reaching for something hidden in his coat pocket. Fearing for her life, Emily bolted for the stairs and scrambled up them as fast as she could. The man pursued her, his erratic behavior making it clear that he was no longer in control of his actions. As she reached the ground floor, she heard a gunshot echo through the library. Emily burst through the library's front door and into the cool night air. She ran to the safety of her car and sped away from the now dreaded library. Her heart was still pounding, and the voices of the past seemed to echo in her mind. The man who had pursued her was never found, and Emily could never forget the night she had uncovered the forgotten files of Hollowbrook. She never returned to the library, and Eliza's diary remained a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the town's history. Hollowbrook's secrets were meant to stay buried, and Emily had learned that some things were better left in the past, for the sake of her own sanity. Story 3. On the outskirts of a quiet, unassuming town, there stood a seemingly ordinary office building known as Starcorp Industries. The employees who worked there often referred to it as the fortress of mundanity, for it was a place of quiet routine, monotonous tasks, and cubicles that stretched out like an endless maze. Little did they know that this mundane office held a chilling secret, waiting for the right soul to uncover it. Meet Lucy, a diligent and dedicated data analyst who had worked at Starcorp for several years. She was one of the few who regularly pulled late-night shifts, often trying to meet tight deadlines while her colleagues had long gone home. One evening, Lucy found herself alone at work, surrounded by rows of empty cubicles and the hum of fluorescent lights. As she busily typed away, she couldn't help but notice a faint murmur in the air, like whispers just on the edge of perception. At first, she dismissed the sound, thinking it was a byproduct of fatigue. However, as the night progressed, the whispers grew more distinct, resembling a conversation too hushed to understand. Lucy decided to investigate. She left her desk, clutching her penlight, and began to follow the eerie sound. The whispers led her deeper into the maze of cubicles, where the office's sterile atmosphere felt somehow oppressive in the late hours. As she ventured further, the words started to take shape, forming a chilling message. She strained her ears and finally made out the repeated phrase, "Find the 7th drawer." Baffled and slightly unnerved, Lucy realized she had reached the edge of the office space. There, in a dimly lit corner, stood a peculiar filing cabinet, older than the others, with 7 drawers. Each drawer bore a symbol, unlike anything she had seen before. Feeling compelled, she opened the 7th drawer, and inside, she found a tattered, leather-bound journal. Lucy withdrew the journal and noticed that it was labeled property of E.H. Stark. She recognized the name as the founder of Starcorp Industries. Curiosity overpowered her apprehension, and she began to read the journal's contents. E.H. Stark's journal revealed a dark history that had been hidden from the world. It spoke of a forbidden experiment conducted in the bowels of the office building. Stark had been obsessed with uncovering a doorway to another realm, one that existed parallel to our own. The experiment involved using a machine known as the Whisperer, which aimed to bridge the gap between dimensions. However, as the experiment progressed, something went terribly wrong. Stark's entries grew increasingly frantic and fearful, describing the appearance of shadowy figures that had emerged from the rift. These entities seemed to feed on fear and despair, and they had a particular fascination with the Whisperer. Lucy's heart raced as she continued to read, for the journal indicated that the rift had never been fully closed. Stark had locked it behind a door hidden in the office, sealed by 7 magical symbols. Only someone chosen by the Whispers could unlock it. Stark believed that the rift had tainted the office, and it was now a breeding ground for these malevolent entities. Lucy's mind swirled with disbelief, but the whispers had grown louder, and the chill in the air deepened. There was no turning back. Her curiosity had become a commitment to uncover the truth. She closed the journal, placed it carefully in her bag, and turned her attention to the mystical symbols on the 7th drawer. As she stared at the symbols, Lucy realized that she could understand their meaning, a knowledge that had been planted within her by the Whispers themselves. It was as though the office was guiding her, preparing her to confront the malevolent entities that now lurked within its walls. With shaking hands, she touched each symbol in the correct order, and as she did, a quiet hum filled the air. The 7th drawer creaked open, revealing a dark passageway. The whispers were now overwhelming, urging her to step through and close the rift once and for all. Lucy took a deep breath and stepped into the passage, her penlight guiding the way. The corridor was ancient, and the walls were adorned with disturbing hieroglyphs, depicting eldritch beings and the horrors of another dimension. The air grew colder, and the oppressive presence of the shadowy entities became tangible. She found herself in a chamber that contained the source of the eerie whispers. The Whisperer, a massive, arcane machine, covered in a thick layer of dust. It emanated a sinister aura, and it was connected to an intricate control panel adorned with strange symbols. The machine seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Lucy, compelled by a sense of duty, began to decipher the controls. The journal had provided enough information for her to understand the basic workings of the Whisperer. It was designed to amplify the connection to the other realm, but it could also be used to sever that connection. As she manipulated the controls, the whispers grew furious and chaotic. Shadowy figures started to emerge from the corners of the room, their forms constantly shifting, their presence exuding menace. They circled around her, their whispering voices growing louder, a cacophony of torment and despair. In a final act of determination, Lucy activated the machine to close the rift. The chamber shuddered, and a blinding light burst forth from the Whisperer. The rift began to collapse, drawing the shadowy entities back into it. They screamed, their voices filled with agony, as they were banished from the office. The machine's final surge released a shockwave of energy that knocked Lucy to the ground. When she awoke, she was back in the maze of cubicles, the whispers gone. The oppressive aura lifted. The rift had been sealed and the shadowy entities were gone, but at a great cost. Lucy realized that she could no longer work at Starcorp Industries. The office had become a place of haunting memories, its walls forever tainted by the horrors she had confronted. She left her job, never looking back. As she walked away from the office building, Lucy couldn't help but feel a lingering unease. The whispers had quieted, but she knew that the secret she had uncovered would stay with her for the rest of her life. The fortress of mundanity had revealed its true nature, and the experience had changed her forever. The Office of Whispers would never be forgotten, a place where the line between our world and another had been dangerously blurred, and only the brave or the chosen could hope to set things right.